Welcome, everybody. I would like to now invite the Peace Corps Sri Lanka Country Director, Kavita Pulapilli, to officially welcome everyone and briefly introduce our facilitator. Kavita, it's over to you.
Thank you, Pri.
Kavita, you are muted.
The host muted me. Welcome, everyone, to the first Forum for English Teachers. We're very excited to bring this to you in collaboration with the Ministry of Education of Sri Lanka. I want to bid a big, huge welcome to Dr. Bimali Indraratne. Thank you so much for agreeing to work with us on this first of a 10-part series. We're very excited about it, and we're very excited to have you to be our first speaker in this series. It's not often we get to hear from such an expert in the field of TESOL, in the field of English language acquisition, someone who has such an amazing passion for inclusion in English language. So we are very excited to have you here and for our teachers to learn from you. This is an ongoing series of work that we are doing with the Ministry of Education to help strengthen English language education in Sri Lanka. And so we're very, very excited to bring this workshop opportunity to all of those of you participating today. And I believe we have over 400 people that are participating and that are interested in this. And we're so excited that we have such great interest across Sri Lanka. And excited to also be highlighting the work of amazing Sri Lankan experts in the field of English education. So without further ado, I will hand it back to Pri to continue this and to Dr. Bimali. Thank you so much, Dr. Bimali.
Thank you, Kavita. So I'm going to directly ask Dr. Bimali to take over and take us forward. We are having only a 1-hour session, and she's got a lot to share with us. Thank you, Dr. Bimali, and it's over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone at Peace Corps for inviting me to deliver this session. And hello to everyone. I can't say good evening because I think people are joining from different places. I think we have about 45 minutes. The aim of this session is to actually give you a practical exposure on flipped classroom. So that's why we ask you to do a pre-task before joining the session. And I hope that you've managed to do the pre-task. If not, I think you can still watch how the others contribute. And my plan is we'll first do the lesson, a sample ELT lesson using the flip model, and then we'll have a discussion on what really flipping means. Okay, so let me share the screen first. So I have sent this link to you where I have given several tasks for you to complete before the session. So we are starting with task 3. So it has several sections. I hope you have managed to complete task 3, assuming that I'm going to start this session. Right, so if you have managed to complete the pre-task, can you give me a thumbs up, please? Okay, great. I think a lot of people have managed to complete the pre-task, so it can be a bit easier for me. Right, so in the pre-task, I ask you to read a story, and pre-task 3, I ask you to read a story and answer some questions. And then the second part is the most important part. I ask you to highlight the words which describe something happened in the past. And then there was a question that I asked whether you notice something similar or anything common in these words, right? So this is where we are going to start. On the chat, you can add the answer to the question. what have you seen common in the words that you highlighted?
Madam, could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, so in task 3, okay, let me share the screen again. In task 3, here I have asked you to read this story and answer the questions. And here I ask you to highlight the words which describe things happened in the past. And then there's the question, do you see anything common in these words? So what's your answer? Can you type the answer on the chat? Okay, great. I think I get the answer. Verbs ending with ed. Okay, past tense verbs ending with ed. Great, right. Okay, so that's the answer I expected. Okay, right. Let's. Okay, let's go to a bit of explanation. Right. So this was the question. You read the story and you noticed that the words you highlighted had ed, right? So that's the common thing. Now let's see why we use ed sometimes in verbs, right? So you saw these 3 sentences in the story. So he walked to the village and you can see ed highlighted in red. He lived in the mountains, again ed. He noticed a box, again ed, right? So why do we use ed? What's the purpose of using ed?
To indicate the past.
Yeah, very good. So it's a way of indicating past. If we want to talk about something happened in the past, then we can use ed, right? So, okay, very good. Some people have gone even to details. They say it is regular past verbs. Very good. Right. So we know that we can use ed to talk about when we want to talk about something happened in the past. Okay, right. So let's see how far you can take this forward, right? Okay, on the chat, I'm going to send a link now to a Padlet, right? Now you know how to use ed, right? We know that we have to use ed if we want to talk about something happened in the past. So on the Padlet, you can click on the link. I'll send you the link in a minute. Click on the link, go to the Padlet and add something you did in the past, last week, right? So write something you did last week. Okay, you can see the link on the chat now. Right, this is the Padlet. You can add, write a complete sentence, 1 or 2, something you did last week. If you have finished, you can add more, right? So you have time, you can add more sentences. It's great. I can see people writing a lot of things that you did last week. So we have things like I watched a Tamil movie, I played with kids, I visited my mother, we played netball, I went to meet my mother, I visited my mother, I completed an assignment. Okay, great. I attended a workshop. I painted my room. Good. I washed my room. Okay, great. Right. So you can see the Padlet, right? So we have a lot of things that people did last week. Can you see the ED words now? How many ED words can you see? Can you count? So we have helped, watched, cleaned, planted, played, washed, watched, painted, tried, studied, phoned, washed, completed, visited, parked, helped. Okay, right. So you can see that there are many verbs where we can add ed letters to make them past, right? So when we want to talk about something happened in the past, we can add ed and make it past. Also, you will notice, right? So some people have used different words. For example, let's say, I went to see my mother. I taught my pupils. I made some buns. Right. What are those? Can somebody give me an answer? You can either type the answer or you can speak. Yeah?
Irregular words.
Yeah, those are irregular, right? So in English, we have regular past verbs and irregular past verbs. So we are not learning irregular past verbs today, right? So we've just practiced the regular past, right? So in regular past, we just add ed to the verb to make it past. So that's how we can talk about something happened in the past. Okay, great, right. So I'm going to stop the activity here, right? So this is very, very simple flipped model, flipped task, right? Okay, let's have a discussion on what we did, right? So in class and before class. So what did you do before class? You can type the answer or you can speak.
We identified a certain kind of words.
Okay.
And then you ask us to create some sentences using that particular words or relating to that particular time.
Yes. So for homework, what did you do?
We answered assigned homework online.
Yeah, so there are some answers. You read a story, completed a worksheet.
Did the assigned homework.
Okay, did the assigned homework. What else? Reading a text.
Simple to identify verbs in isolation. And here in the in-class activity, we built up sentences. It's more constructive.
Yeah, so my question is, what did you do before coming to the session? Right? So before coming to the session, you had to do something related to this lesson. So yes, you had to complete a worksheet, you had to read the story. So
we can ask to write about their diary, ma'am. Last week diary activities.
Yeah, that has to be something you can do in class. But my question is, what did we do before joining the class?
we were made aware of the things that we were going to learn in the class without
okay, good
the
answer.
knowledge.
Yes, right. So basically, what we did in this lesson was I didn't teach the content in class. Right? So
That's true, yes.
you worked on the content even before coming to the class. So if we teach grammar, we know that we have to give input. We have to give meaningful input to introduce grammar, right? So there are different two main ways where we give input. One is reading, one is listening. Right, so you would use a story or something where the target language, let's say simple past or present continuous, we use a lot of examples of the target language in the text, and then we make learners first work on the text, right? They need to work on the input text. It can be even a recording, listening, recording, or reading story or a document, right? So input is very important when teaching grammar, and in a flipped model, we give the input before class, right? So usually in a traditional classroom, what happens is we even give the input within the class, right? Learners come to class and then they read, they work on the input in class. But in a flipped model, we don't do the input in class. We let students work on their own processing input, right? So for this lesson, I couldn't do collaborative work because you don't know each other and we had more than 100 participants. So in an ideal class, if you have 30 or 50 students who are regularly coming to your class, you can even do the pre-class activity as a collaborative task. In groups, in pairs, they work on the input text. They try to find answers to the questions. They highlight the verbs. In this session, in this one, they highlight the verbs together. They discuss what's in these, and they come up with the answer. So by the time they come to class, they are ready to discuss, right? So what did we do in class then? So they came to class after processing the input, right? So what do they do in class then? What did we do in the class, in the session?
We discussed about the assignment, what you gave.
Personalize the content.
Yes, very good. Personalizing the content, yes. Practice, yes, very good. Yeah, so the practice happens in class, right? So the processing part happens outside the class, before the class, and in class, you practice or you apply knowledge, or you produce, right? So here I did only one activity, one practice activity, but in an ideal situation, you have more time. You can do several practice activities. So in the flip model, we have sufficient time to do practice in class. That is more important, right? So in language learning, practice and production, they are more important, right? So you need to give them time to do that with teachers' guidance. So you have that additional time to do more and more practice. So also, because all of you are English teachers, so I didn't have problems, right? You said immediately that's ED and that's past tense. But in an ideal class, there will be questions from students, right? So why do we use ED? What is ED? So any other questions? So you can have a discussion about the input, and then immediately you go to practice activities. So the flipped model is you process input first, and then you do the practice tasks in class. So basically, when do they do homework?
After the class work?
Time
Usually after the
Before the
after
class.
the class work.
before the class, right? So they do homework before the class, not after the class. In traditional classes, what happens? We give input, we work on the input in class, and then we don't have time sometimes, right? So we ask students to do the practice activities for homework. But in flip model, it's the other way around. They come prepared to the class. They have homework to do before the class, and then they do the application part in class. So that's the difference between the traditional class and the flipped class. Right, so have you got any questions? You can add the questions here if you have any questions.
Yes, madam. Any special reason to give the activities for homework before the class?
Yes, I'll come to the theoretical explanation at the end, right? So I'll explain the theory behind using this.
Okay, thank you.
Right, any other questions? So can I ask you, like, did you understand the difference in the model from the traditional class to the flipped class?
Yes, ma'am. Clear, very clear.
Okay, good, right. So then let's have a look at, so I have several other tasks given, but let's discuss a bit of theory about blended learning and flipped learning, right? So I also gave you two tasks, task 1 and 2. I asked you to read a text on blended learning and answer some questions. And also you had to watch a video on flipped classrooms and answer some questions. Okay, can you type, or you can speak? Can you tell me the main feature of blended learning? Not flipped, blended.
Face-to-face learning experience. And the very experience sometimes give with that with online and technology. We can
yes. Any others?
Face-to-face learning.
It's a combination of traditional FTF learning experiences with mobile and technology.
Yeah, basically it's a combination of face-to-face learning and online learning, right? So blended learning means a combination of face-to-face learning and online learning. And we make this blend in different ways, right? So sometimes the face-to-face part can be longer and blended part online part can be shorter. Sometimes it can be the other way around. More and more online activities and very small face-to-face part, right? So you in the text that you read, you could see different versions of blended learning. So it's a combination of traditional face-to-face learning and online learning. Okay, so then what's the, so flipped classroom is one of the blended learning methods, right? So flipped is not a different thing. It's one of the blended learning methods. So then what's the main feature of flipped classrooms?
Some introductory activities are done at the beginning and practicing stages.
Can access the content anytime?
As an in-class activity.
Yes, so that's the main difference, right? So flipped classroom, so blended learning, you don't really need to do input as pre-class, right? Blended learning can be you do the lesson in class and you give online homework. That is possible in blended learning. But flipped model is different because it's a must that you do the input as online mode or before class, and you do the practice or application part in class, in the face-to-face class. So that's the difference. Blended face-to-face online combination, it can be in different ways, this combination. Flipped classrooms, It's a combination of both online and face-to-face, but the main feature is in flipped classroom, students do the pre-class tasks and be ready and come to the class. So, for example, if you have joined this session without doing the pre-class task, it may be difficult for you to understand what's going on, right? Because the input we did as pre-task, you had to do a task before coming to the class. So you should be ready to do the activities in class. So in order to understand what's happening in class, you need to do the pre-class activities, right? So that's the difference between blended learning and flipped classrooms. Okay, I've got some questions for you because there are a lot of people joining, so maybe you don't have time to respond to questions. So I'll give you a question. Okay. Right. Can you see the website address here, www.menti.com? So if you type this, you will have to add this code and then you can answer this question. You have to click and answer the question. If you want, I can send the link on the chat. Okay, it's there, I think. Type the code and then answer the question.
Bimali has a question in the chat.
Okay. Right. So there's a question: if what if the students don't understand the pre-task? So one of the things you can do is you can ask students to work collaboratively at the beginning of the class and revise. So kind of a recap, just to check whether they understand. Okay, right. So when should we give input in a flipped classroom? I think most of you have answered the question correct. So we give input as pre-class homework, right? Not in class. So in class, we don't give input. In class, we do practice. Input is given as the pre-class homework task. Okay, I've got another question. Right. My second question is, again, you can answer on Mentimeter. What can we do in the face-to-face session in a flipped classroom? You can type the answer. Yeah.
Ma'am, where can we type it?
If you go to www.menti.com on the internet and then enter the code, then you can type the answer.
Thank you.
Right. I think we have a lot of good answers. Practice tasks, solving problems, very good answer. Supplementary tasks, application. Yes, that's one of the very most important things. Clarify doubts, apply knowledge, discuss answers. Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, right, good, thank you. So we can now. I think you understand, right? So in class, what we do is basically application, practice and application, right? You can actually start with a recap, like I did. I did a small recap when it comes to. I asked like, what did you understand by flipped classroom, and what did you understand by blended learning? So you can do a small recap just to check whether students have understood the input, and then the next part is application. So you make them apply what they have learned in some tasks. Okay, right. So I guess you have understood the flip model. Let's have a look at some other things we need to discuss. Okay, right. So I have another question now. If we use flipped classrooms, so imagine that you can think of your own situation where you teach, and if you want to use flipped, okay, so let's talk about advantages, right? What are the advantages of using a flipped model? Very good. Practice makes perfect. Yes. Yes, learner autonomy, very important again. So we increase learner autonomy, engaging learners are more engaging, more time for practice, good. Self-paced learning, yes. Mm-hmm. So for example, input processing, different learners may need different times, different, if we do it in class, all learners may not learn it in the same pace, so they have more time to work on their own. Time saving, yeah, students come prepared, more engaging. Prior preparation. Mm-hmm. Very good. Free space for practice, actually, practice and application. Deeper understanding, yes. Independent learning. Mm-hmm. Yes, so you can practice skills in class, not monotonous, yes. So the teacher doesn't explain things in class. Right, time save, flexible learning, good, yes. Okay, right, so we can see that there are several advantages of using a flipped model, mainly because it frees up for practice and application, which are very important in learning, right? So that's one of the main advantages of using the flipped model. And also it increases learner autonomy. So learners first, because they see input before the class, so they have to process input on their own. They might struggle, but still they will work on their own. There is this discovery learning, more analytical learning. Those things can take place when learners try on their own before teacher helps them, or in traditional classes, sometimes we deliver, right? So the model we use is teacher delivers. So teacher acts as the knowledge giver, but learners sometimes passive, right? So, but in flipped model, because they have to process input on their own, so they will do more research. They will come up with their own interpretations of the input. So there will be learner autonomy will be developed. Okay, right. So then it's as advantages, we also have disadvantages of using flipped classrooms, right? So let's have a look at some disadvantages, right? So it's not, I'm going to tell you the disadvantages. You will tell us the disadvantages. What do you think are the disadvantages of flipped classrooms? More work for teachers. Yeah, I think one of the main challenges for teachers is learners might not do the assigned work so before coming to the class. Increased screen time. What do you mean by low attention? Whoever typed it, you can type the answer if you want on the chat. Tech issues, yes, accessibility issues. No peer learning. Peer learning actually takes place in class. You have more time for peer learning because you do practice and production activities in class. So there can be more peer learning in the flipped model. And also you can assign not just individual activities, but group or peer activities as input pre-class activities. Yes, it can take more planning time for teachers. Absentees lose lesson, okay. Right, so there's weak students will give up, but I think it depends on how we design the pre-activities and how much how much help that we give them. So it's I agree that it takes a lot of planning time. You need to plan carefully when you using a flipped model. Not familiar, yes, I think that's one of the one problem. When the students are not familiar and when the teachers are not familiar, it can be a bit challenging at the beginning. Technical knowledge, yes.
Madam, how about if they don't have the basic knowledge, if the student?
If you're doing let's say starter lesson, so your materials should match with the starter level. For example, you can just give matching activities, picture matching activities, picture and word matching. So it depends on how you design the lesson. Okay, right. Okay, so I think Viraj asked a question earlier, like why are we doing it, right? So I'm going to just give you a brief theoretical explanation as to why flipped learning is considered an important way of learning. Okay, right. Have you seen Bloom's taxonomy before?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
So, yeah, according to Bloom's taxonomy, we have lower order skills and higher order skills, right? So lower order means remembering. So you teach, learners remember, but that's the lower order skill. Then the next level is we explain, the students understand. That's again lower order skill. Then comes apply, application, right? Now, it's not just understanding. The ultimate goal of education is that they have to apply what they have learned in different contexts. So in a flipped model, we give more time for application with the teacher's guidance. But in a traditional classroom, we do remember, understand type of activities in class, and then we let students go home and apply for homework. So the teacher guidance is not there for application part. But in the flipped model, the lower order skills are tapped in the input sessions on their own. They will do them on their own. And then teacher has more time to focus on application, whether students can apply. You can check in class. So practice activities. So let's say the simple task I did, the Padlet task, you just check whether they could apply what they have learned on their own. So that you have more time to do the application part and then analyze. So analytical part, again, you let students analyze input. Without explaining the input, you give them a chance to analyze the input. So it's kind of problem solving type of activity, right? So they work on their own, thinking about input, and then through that, we increase their analytical ability, their ability to evaluate, and also if we give more time for application, production type activities, so you give time for creation. So one of the reasons why flipped model is considered a good model of teaching is that it can tap higher order skills of Bloom's taxonomy. It gives you time. It gives the teacher time to tap these skills. So there is a Bloom's digital taxonomy where you can use different digital tools in order to tap these skills. So remembering, there are several tools like highlighting, searching, then understanding, tagging, subscribing, tweeting, applying, calculating, charting. So that you ask them to chart, make a chart, edit things, and analyzing. So there are different applications. You can say creating. You can make learners blog, make films, do podcasting. So things like that will make learners, their creative ability will be increased, right? So these are digital tools that you can use to tap different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, right. So I think we just have 10 minutes to finish. I think I have 5 minutes, right? So, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have.
You can go a little bit over time. I think we took a little time to start. That's fine.
Okay, right. So I can, if we have time, probably you can think, right? So I have given another task. I think it's task 4. I have given a video and some activities. So it is just to introduce the singular and plural. So that can be input, and you can think of what type of practice activities you can do based on these input activities in class. So some practice and production activities that you can do in class. That's probably for homework again, because that's application. We might not have time to discuss this, but then I think there can be questions, things you didn't understand. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Viraj, did I answer your question? Sorry.
Yes, madam. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I have another question, madam. It's very simple question, a technical question. The way you have ordered the activities in a line. Now, we know how to prepare them separately, but how can we order them?
What do you mean? Or which activities?
One followed by another. So we have the knowledge of creating activities separately. One in what?
Oh, you mean like a grammar lesson?
No, madam. The way you
technology used there.
The technology. I'm asking a tech question.
I think you're asking how to embed it.
Yeah.
In the same page, on the same page.
You mean like on the website?
Yes, I think that's what it says.
The activities that you completed for pre-task?
Yes, madam. The way you have done it.
Okay, right. So I have a website. So I mean, if you run a website, then there are tools that you can use to create activities. But if you, so I think, if you can use things like Google Classroom, for example, you can upload a video and then you can do a questionnaire, quiz easily. So similar quizzes that I have added. So it's not difficult to do even on Google Classroom. You might not have all the tools in Google Classroom, but some of the tools you can use. If you use Moodle, then there are more options, but I'm not sure I think you have to be in an institution to use Moodle, but Moodle has more options. I think there's something called Edmodo. That's also an online free platform that might give more options.
Dr. Bimali, can you give an example for a grammar lesson, how to do it using PLIF classroom model?
Yeah, that's what I did. So the ED lesson is a sample grammar lesson where we did the input, right? So input learners read the story, they highlighted the target structure, and they came up with the answer in class. And then we did the practice activity in class. But this is very, very short, right? In a real classroom, you have to do more practice activities, control practice, clear practice.
Madam, then I would know whether it becomes a deductive way of teaching grammar?
So deductive and inductive. So this is more inductive, right? So because it blends both. So before class, they had, because I just asked the question, what do you see in common in these words? So it's an inductive way. But then when the lesson started, I gave a brief grammar explanation, which is deductive. So nowadays, we actually use the discovery method. So discovery means we let learners discover first without explaining grammar. And then after they discover, then we give an explanation. So it's a combination.
Thank you.
Right. Any other questions? You can also type your questions on the chat. Okay, what about giving homework after the session too? Yes, if you want, you can give homework. But flipped model, it's important that you give pre-class activities, but it doesn't matter whether you give post-class homework as well.
Don't you think it's challenging when the mixed ability groups are there in the class?
I think it depends. I mean, one of the things in blended learning is you can differentiate. right? So if you think there are different learners with different abilities, you can differentiate the pre-tasks. So I'll give you an example. So imagine there's a slow reader, right? So you wouldn't give that person the whole task. You might ask them to read only one part and do a task. So you make them engaged somehow.
Yes.
Okay, what about speaking? Yes, speaking it's a good question. You can ask them to brainstorm for pre-activity. They can come up with all the points they want to discuss. They can do the research for pre-class activity and then come and do speaking in class. Also, if you want, you can give them a video of some, let's say your speaking task is self-introduction. So you can ask them to watch a video and do some tasks, right? Somebody is self-introducing and then you ask them to do some works using based on the video. And then they brainstorm, they come prepared to deliver in class. Okay, right. So there's a comment that asking me to do more online sessions. Let's see. I think I can't answer that question, but thank you for the comment. Okay, right. So I think I have 2 minutes. If you have understood what we discussed, I mean, 1 hour is not enough to understand everything, but if you get the basic idea of flipped classroom, can you give a thumbs up, please, on Zoom? Okay, thank you. I think you understood the basics. So the basic thing is you do input as homework before class, and then you do practice and production application in class. So that's what we mean by a flipped classroom.
Do we have any more questions? Or anything you want to clarify? Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Indraratne. I think all of us English teachers have learned some fascinating new concepts and tools and technology that we can start using from today. And I think all of us will do well to remind ourselves that the proof of the pudding is in the eating, as they say. So it's when we use these methodologies that Dr. Bimali has shared with us effectively and offer an improved learning experience to the children of Sri Lanka or wherever our participants are from. I think then we can say, we don't really need a certificate because we can show that we offer our children and that we're competent in engaging our students in blended learning and flipped classrooms. So I think the comment itself that you should do some further online teaching, I think it just shows that it's a really good session, and I'm really glad that we chose this particular topic to start our forum off. And what I would like to just share with you is that this is the first of 10 sessions. And while I thank Dr. Bimali, I want to share with you our next speaker. Noel, if you don't mind sharing the flyer. The next session will be on the 29th of April, and it is a workshop on speaking activities. This will be conducted by Ms. Mithila Veerasinghe. She's a Fulbright scholar, and her profile is on the flyer. So I will send you the details for the registration after the Aurudu holidays so that you won't forget. And please feel free to share among other English teachers who may benefit from this workshop. So now, before we close, I would like to, okay, you can take a minute to have a look at that. I will send you the registration. Thanks, Noel. And let me, okay, you can stop sharing. Thank you. Okay, I would just like you to unmute yourselves and thank Dr. Indraratne once more. On behalf of Peace Corps Sri Lanka and on behalf of the Ministry of Education, I would really like to thank you. I'll invite everybody on this session to say thank you and make some noise.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, madam.
very much, madam.
Dear madam, it's really interesting. We learn new things.
Really inspiring.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so may I wish each and every one of you good health and a positive mindset as you teach our children not only English, but teach them to be global citizens with honesty, integrity, those who can take over the leadership of our countries and our world in the years to come. Teachers do a fantastic job and we are so proud of you. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next month on the 29th of April. All right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bimali. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much and wish you good luck, ma'am.